السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Thank you guys for joining me this afternoon for a reading of a couple of my books. One is He Came to Perfect Moral Character, which is this book right here, which we will be reading from tonight. All right, so if any of you have purchased this book before and there's a particular sentence or passage or anything about this book that you would like to ask questions about, please, by all means, ask, inshallah. All right, I have a couple of passages that I selected that I would like to read from. If you have anything that you would like, me to touch upon as it relates to this book, please feel free to share your passage, your page number, your quote. That way I can elaborate on it, inshallah. Those of you who purchased the book recently, all of your orders have been fulfilled. All of your orders have been shipped out. So the book should, if it hasn't gotten to you by now, then it should be there between tomorrow, Saturday, or Monday. But you can purchase the book by using my PayPal account, imamshadidmuhammad@gmail. imamshadidmuhammad@gmail.com. I'm going to pin the email where you can purchase it. Okay, so that is my PayPal email. So if you have PayPal, then you can go ahead and purchase it on PayPal. The book is $15. And the shipping is $7. So that's a total of $22 for the book. So I pinned the email that is for PayPal. So if you have PayPal, then you can purchase the book via PayPal. Please be sure when you purchase the book, it's $15 for the book and $7 for the shipping. All right, and the shipping will be priority shipping 2 to 3 days. And if you purchase the book today, inshallah, I'll ship your book off tomorrow. All right. Also, this book here, The Revolution of Love, a man's perspective on loving multiple women in a non-traditional marriage. This book is $25. And you can purchase it through PayPal the same exact way. And then there is the third book, which is called The Paradox of Change. This book is also $20, $19.99. And it's called The Paradox of Change, The New Muslim's Guide to Overcoming Obstacles. So not just for somebody who is a new Muslim, a new woman who's a new convert to Islam, but even someone who was a more seasoned Muslim, but you're finding obstacles in your path and you're trying to become closer to your religion. You're finding obstacles in your path and trying to become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a good purchase. And this book was based upon the life of Sulaym, who was the mother of Anas ibn Malik. Anas ibn Malik, that illustrious companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I took from her life and how she converted to Islam and all of the trials and the obstacles that she faced. And I wrote a whole entire book on it, right? If you want to know all three, this one is 25, this one is 20, that's 45, plus 15. That's $60 for all three. And for the shipping, it's going to be about $15 to ship all three. All right. The shipping book rate is $3. Yeah, that's if you're going to do media mail. You might get it in 10 days. I'm doing priority, which is roughly $7, $6 and some change, and that'll get to you in 2 to 3 days. All right. If you want to pay $3, sure, it'll get to you media mail, and that'll take about 10 to 15 days before you get it. Anyway, so if you would like to purchase those books, yes, if there is another way other than PayPal, please email me. Email me at imamshadidmuhammad@gmail. I don't like to just give out my Cash App. I really don't even like using Cash App. But if that's all you have, please email me at imamshadidmuhammad@gmail.com, and I will converse with you via email and ensure that the payment goes through and that I get your mailing address and everything. All right. I don't understand what class. There's no class. Tonight we're doing a book reading. All right. So I'm going to choose some passages. So for those of you who just recently purchased the books, your books were already shipped out, inshallah. Your books were shipped out. If you don't have them by now, then maybe tomorrow or Saturday, inshallah ta'ala. I just had someone said if someone wants to purchase the book and they can't afford it, that she will be willing to purchase the book for you. Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. That is a beautiful gesture. Beautiful gesture. I still see that you guys have that Ramadan generosity with you. Alhamdulillah. So this one here is called He Came to Perfect Moral Character. All right, the persona of Prophet Muhammad through my eyes. The persona of Prophet Muhammad through my eyes. This book has been revised for the second time. I wrote this book in 2008. I wrote this book, all right? And I took the concept of this book comes from a very popular book, a very popular self-help book that maybe you all are familiar with, and it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that was written by a man by the name of Dale Carnegie, all right? Dale Carnegie wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book was given to me by one of my coworkers, a non-Muslim coworker who handed me that book one day when I walked into work and asked me if I would take a look at the book and read the book. And as I began reading through the book, I started to see many similarities between that book and the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so my supervisor, who was a Muslim, he saw the book laying on my desk one day and he said to me, why don't you take that book and why don't you rewrite that from an Islamic perspective? He said, I think that you can do it. He said, why don't you take that book and why don't you write it from an Islamic perspective? And I said, you know what? I will, but it's a task and I really need some time. So I quit my job there and I moved to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This was after I graduated, came back to America, started working here, and I quit my job. I moved back to Saudi Arabia, and I began writing this book while I was on my plane ride back to Saudi Arabia. I moved to Riyadh, and I began writing this book while I was on the plane. A 13-hour plane ride, I think I spent roughly about 8 hours writing this book by hand. Writing this book by hand, just sharing some of what went into writing this book. And then once I landed in Riyadh and I got settled with my job, obviously anyone who worked in Saudi Arabia, you know that when you first get there, you can't take your family with you most of the time. You can't take your family with you, so you're there by yourself until you can work out all of the visa paperwork and everything to get your family there. So my family did not come with me on that trip, so I was pretty much in Saudi Arabia by myself for the next probably 2 months. Yeah, and it was in that 2-month period that I wrote this book. In that 2-month period, I was able to write this book and to publish it the first time. All right. And then just recently, 2 summers ago, I went through the book. I saw a lot of grammatical errors, and then obviously, some experiences that I had that I was able to offer to the book that I wasn't able to offer before. So basically almost a 10-year period, 10 years later, I revised the book in 2018. I wrote the book in 2008. I revised the book in 2018, almost 10 years to the date that I released it the first time. I revised the book, and here we are. All right, so I'm going to start on a page. So if any of you have the book and you want to read along with me, you can buy the book. I pinned the Gmail right here. That Gmail is also connected to my PayPal account. So if you want to write it, you want to send the money to PayPal, you can use that email address there. All right. Okay, so let's start with reading why I read the book. And also in this book is my biography and, how I converted to Islam. So, a lot of people ask, well, what's your story? How did you convert to Islam? All of that is in the author's autobiography, which is on page 12. From page 12 all the way to page 12 to page 32. All right, page 12 to page 32. So that's 20 pages. 20 pages from page 12 to page 32. 20 pages is my autobiography. Basically, how I converted to Islam, where I came from, how did I arrive at the point of being in the Islamic University of Medina, to the end of that. And so let me read the preface. Let me read the preface to you. The fervor to write this book has lingered within me since first reading Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People in 2008. Carnegie's book elaborated on topics that the religion of Islam has emphasized and encouraged for more than a millennium. Taking the general premise of Carnegie's book, Self-Help and Empowerment, coupled with the basic Islamic principles of tazkiyah and tarbiyah, self-purification and nurturing, in the Islamic tradition, I married the two concepts in order to address the myriad of suppositions held by Muslims and non-Muslims alike regarding the character of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what I did was I took the concept of self-help, which was the premise of Dale Carnegie's book, Self-Help and Empowerment, and I took that concept and I married it with the concept of tazkiyah and tarbiyah that we have in Islam, and that is self-development, self-purification, which is from an Islamic standpoint. And I took those two concepts and I married them together in order to elaborate on the character of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The book before the reader, he came to perfect moral character, the persona of Prophet Muhammad through my eyes, is not a rendition of Carnegie's book, nor was it intended to serve as a substitute for his exemplary endeavor. However, this book serves to highlight the parallels between the qualities mentioned in Carnegie's work and those exemplified in the persona of one of the greatest men to ever grace the terrain of promoting human welfare through the concept of monotheism, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In addition, this book seeks to tackle some of the moral and social perils that have and continue to plague many Muslim communities in the West today. The subtitle was added after deep contemplation over the one-dimensional view of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's character I once held upon my acceptance of Islam in contrast to what I know now. Meaning, the subtitle, which is the persona of Prophet Muhammad through my eyes, the reason why I added that subtitle there was because when I first converted to Islam, I had a one-dimensional view of Prophet Muhammad, as most people do. When we first convert to Islam, we don't really know Prophet Muhammad like that, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We don't really know him like that. We don't have a deep connection with his character, well-rounded, holistically. We don't. When we convert to Islam, we see Prophet Muhammad as this peaceful, nice, loving guy, and that's the way that he is presented to us. Upon going to the Islamic University, studying in the College of Hadith, I got an opportunity to become deeply, deeply associated and familiar with the character of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, unlike pretty much anybody else. You won't find many people who went to the Islamic University who studied the life of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam like the students who went to the College of Hadith. Those of us who were favored enough, blessed enough to attend lessons in the College of Hadith, we became familiar with the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam unlike any other college, any other student in the university. That's a fact. And I don't regret going to the College of Hadith. You have many students of knowledge who might say, I wish I would have went to the College of Fiqh. I wish I went to this college or that college. I don't regret ever going to the College of Hadith, ever. I don't ever regret it. And at the time when I graduated, I thought that much of what we learned in the College of Hadith, how in the world would I ever be able to teach that in America? And as we see, as time is moving forward and you begin to mature with the knowledge and the information that you were given, you start to find ways to disseminate that information in a way where it is helpful and beneficial to the people who are the recipients of that information, right? When you're young, you don't really understand what you're holding, the depth of what you're holding. You don't really understand the depth of what you're holding. And then as you begin to mature with the information that you have, you start to see the relevance of it, right? So in addition, this book seeks to tackle some of the moral and social perils that have and continue to plague many Muslim communities in the West today. The subtitle was added after deep contemplation over the one-dimensional view of Prophet Muhammad's character I once held upon my acceptance of Islam in contrast to what I know now. Every new convert to Islam is exposed, even on a micro level, to the character of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, the dilemma is that their Islamic worldview is far too narrow to see his persona holistically within the broader framework of moral character or moral excellence. That when we convert to Islam, our Islamic worldview is very narrow, very shallow, because of the lack of knowledge, the lack of information. So we have a very shallow outlook on the Islamic world. All right. And we can't see the personality of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam within the broader framework of moral excellence. This is part and parcel because of the advertent or inadvertent biases of those who occupy positions to teach. Meaning, part of the reason why our view of Prophet Muhammad's character is so narrow is part and parcel because of the people who are teaching, who hold the positions of leadership and teaching in the masajid, because they, a lot of times, at least during that time, they took very little time to promote and to expound upon the character of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam on a holistic level. You might have that now because the culture kind of dictates that when we talk about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we exercise extreme caution especially for those who are following the Quran and the Sunnah, that we exercise extreme caution and that we infuse in our teachings what is culturally relevant with the time, what is culturally, going on with our culture during that time. But at the time when I converted to Islam, you didn't really have that. It was a very hardcore preaching and teaching of Islam, very much so. There are some who incline towards to the extreme left, describing Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as exceedingly passive and lenient, and those on the far right who assert that he was extremely aggressive and insensitive. The dichotomy of these two views represent an imbalance that leaves one to believe that he was in fact defined by one extreme or the other, and leaves very little room for one to put each quality in its proper place, given the appropriate situation and or circumstance. So what I'm saying is that you have some people who paint Prophet Muhammad as this kind, lenient, gentle man that would never harm anybody. And then you have some who paint Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as this insensitive, aggressive warmonger who wanted nothing more than to convert the entire world to Islam by force. And when you look at it from these two perspectives, it's almost like, how sometimes a rapper might talk about drugs and partying, and then a person might say, okay, I remember they were interviewing Tupac and they said, well, you seem like a walking contradiction, that, 1 minute you're talking about Dear Mama and you're talking about Brenda's Got a Baby. And then on the flip side of that, you're talking about, disrespectful things towards women or whatever the case may be. You seem like a walking oxymoron. You seem like a walking contradiction. And, his response, and I believe as well as T.I., he was called on the same thing. And he said that, it's all me. It's not, I don't have to be one thing or the other. Why can't it all be me? You know what I mean? Why can't it all be who I am? Why do you have to paint me one way or the other? And that's the same thing with how we look at Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We tend to see him as one way or the other without seeing that his character was dictated by the circumstance and situation that he was in at that moment. If, he was in a situation that required war, that required battle, that required him to be a little bit aggressive, or sometimes what might appear to be a little bit insensitive, that was the nature of the situation that he was in at that moment. But then there were times when he was in situations that required his compassion, his mercy. Like the time when, he arbitrated between Ali ibn Abi Talib and Ali's neighbor. They both had a garden. And one of the neighbors came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he uses up all the water. So I have very little water to water my garden. And so the Prophet ﷺ told Ali, water your garden first, save him water, and then give him the rest of the water. The man was, upset with that. And he went back to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, you only told Ali that he could water his garden first because he's your cousin. This is unjust. This is unjust. This is unfair. And the Prophet ﷺ told Ali, water your whole garden and don't leave him nothing. Don't leave him nothing. Now, if you were to come only to the second part of that story, the Prophet ﷺ would seem insensitive in that moment. But then when you look at the whole entire story and you see why the Prophet ﷺ took that approach, you understand. You understand why he took that approach because you understand the whole scenario. And this is the problem with many people who teach that they don't give you the whole story. They don't give you the backstory. They give you one little section, one little portion, and have you draw your whole entire conclusion from the portion that they shared with you without giving you the backstory, without giving you a deeper understanding for why the situation ended up the way that it did. Every ayah in the Quran, every surah in the Quran has a backstory. Every surah in the Quran has a backstory. You can't just jump into a surah and then start reading the surah and think that you understand it. You got to understand, first and foremost, is the surah Madaniyah or Makkiyah? Was the surah revealed before Hijrah or after Hijrah? Was the ayat revealed before Hijrah or after Hijrah? All right, that'll let you know the time frame. And what was going on at that time when the ayat was revealed? Was there a story? Was there a qissa? Was there a story that was behind the revelation of that ayat? If it was, then go back to the story so that you can understand the specific reason for which the ayat was revealed. And then we can take the general ruling of the ayat afterwards once we understand the specific reason for which it was revealed. You understand? Context, absolutely. Thank you, Sister Fatima. Context. Context is everything. Context is what gives words meaning. Words don't have meaning without context. Okay, so according to Islam, there is an appropriate time and place in which both qualities of leniency and harshness are considered praiseworthy. A fact that I would later discover to be true as I became more acquainted with the depth of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's character. That there are times when leniency and harshness are both considered praiseworthy. There are times when being harsh is actually considered praiseworthy. And there are times when being lenient is actually considered praiseworthy. Kullun fi mahallihi, everything in its proper place. As a student in the College of Hadith in the Islamic University of Medina, great emphasis was placed on learning the intricate details of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's character. This was so because our concentration was on learning and memorizing his traditions, which were infused with bits and pieces of his personality. So as a student in the College of Hadith, we had to learn the intricate details of Prophet Muhammad's life because our whole entire field of study, at-takhassus, our whole entire specialty and field of study was memorization of the Prophet ﷺ's traditions. How would those traditions have any meaning to us as students if we didn't understand the personality and the persona of the Prophet ﷺ? So we had to, along with memorizing hadith, we also had to go back, we had to learn his life. Because in learning his life, we learned bits and pieces of his personality. It gave the hadith that we were memorizing life. They now have meaning to us. When you look at a hadith, an interaction between the Prophet ﷺ and one of his companions, you look at that as an isolated incident, you will never be able to see the beauty in that interaction until you go back and you learn about the Prophet ﷺ's character. When you understand the Prophet's character, and then you go back and you read a hadith, that hadith now has a different meaning, a different understanding. That engagement between the Prophet ﷺ and that particular companion, that now has a different meaning for you. Because now you have an understanding of his personality. And upon completion of my studies at the university, I graduated with a completely different view of his personality than what I was introduced to upon my conversion to Islam. And so this is why I chose the subtitle, The Persona of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ through my eyes. It was now me seeing Prophet Muhammad, now after going through this rigorous study for an entire 6 years, going through this rigorous study in the Arabic language, in the very same city where the Prophet ﷺ migrated to. You understand? I have a completely different view and understanding. Sister Esma, if you can email me afterwards, I don't know why you haven't received your book. Your book was actually one of the first ones I mailed off. Inshallah, I'll email me and I'll send you the tracking number so that you can actually follow up on the book. Yours was one of the first books I sent off. I don't know why you haven't received it. Okay? However, this in no way implies that what I am presenting in the few lines of this book constitutes the entire sum of Prophet Muhammad's character. But the reader will notice upon completion of this book, if Allah wills, that his or her perception and overall view of Prophet Muhammad's personality and moral excellence will be far more vivid than it was prior to reading it. I promise you. After reading this book, I promise you, your overall view and perception of Prophet Muhammad's character and personality and moral excellence will be far more vivid than it was before you read this book. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a man who spent most of his life empowering those who were around him. He empowered his companions as well as many of the non-Muslims who did not share the same faith as he, to confront the inevitable challenges that presented themselves given the multifaceted and complex society in which they lived. This was accomplished by using a multitude of character building strategies demonstrated in his own life, as he was described by his wife as being the Quran in motion. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she said to the Sahaba when they asked her about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's character, she said, "Ala taqra'una al-Quran? Kana khuluquhu al-Quran." Don't you read the Quran? His character was the Quran. His character was the Quran. However, in recent times, didactic lectures, educational seminars, and courses are mediums that are used to empower listeners with little to no regard for practical application and exemplification of his extraordinary character. You understand? In today's time, you have all of these didactic lectures where the guy gets up to the pulpit, he speaks for 45 minutes, and in some instances, 15 to 20 minutes. You have some conferences and lectures. They have so many scholars. I mean, it's so asinine to me. You have so many conferences, right, where they have 20 scholars, 15 scholars that are coming to speak. And they allot for these scholars 10, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes at max 20 minutes, 25 minutes to impart information to the community. I'm not saying that, you got to sit there for an hour, but 25 minutes, his introduction is 5 minutes. I'll do you one better. When he's being introduced by the person who is introducing him, Sheikh Fulan, and then mention all of his accolades, all of his accomplishments, and he's a sheikh here, graduated from here, he studied with this sheikh and that sheikh, and blah, 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 blah. And that's, kind of buttering you up, all right? A person who's a real scholar doesn't require all of that. That's not necessary. You're not here for my resume. You're not here for my resume. Usually in the brochure that everybody is given when they come into the conference, you're given a brochure. Underneath the sheikh's picture, it tells you all that information. You don't need to introduce him for 5 minutes, mentioning all of his accolades and all of his accomplishments. For what? That takes 5 minutes within itself. Then the sheikh gets up and he begins and he starts off with a joke, to try to butter the crowd up, to make the crowd feel this. I'm giving you the whole script, and it's corny, all of it. All of it is corny. But some of you guys, you love this stuff. You live for it. It's corny. From where I'm standing, it's really corny, honestly. Get up and he tells a quick joke. I want to tell you a quick story because they read all of these self-help books. They watch all of these, these TED Talks, and they watch all of this stuff, and then they want to incorporate that in, in their approach to teaching Islam. You get up, you tell a joke, and then you kind of find a way to segue into. So basically, if the talk is 25 minutes, he's only really imparting information for about 10 minutes. Right. It's entertainment. That's exactly what it is. And that's why most people, believe it or not, that's why many people go to these conferences. You just want to be entertained. You're tired of being cooped up in the house. You go rent a hotel for 2 days, take the kids out, and you go and you sit. And you sit for 10 minutes at a time, 15 minutes at a time. The questions are redundant, and you leave after 2 or 3 days, believing that, you have a renewed spirit and a renewed connection to Islam. And then in 3 or 4 days, within the next week, you back to square one all over again because they haven't given you anything practical. They haven't given you anything that you can go home and that you can begin implementing in your life right now. You understand? Haven't given you anything tangible. Haven't given you anything practical. This stuff is ridiculous, man. It's ridiculous. Stop supporting these 3-day conferences that are there to collect money, that are there to, we have to change the way that we have been doing things, man. Change the way that we do. And then the whole 3 days they're doing fundraisers. We're going to stop here for a fundraiser. It's like, how much money do you have to collect? How much money? How many millions of dollars do you have to collect? Because you got to pay your speakers, upwards of $20,000, $30,000 to come give 2 talks for 25 minutes apiece. You have got to be kidding me. $25,000, and you pay him $25,000 because of his name. He's a household figure, household name. Meanwhile, the information that he imparted upon the community was trash. You gotta be kidding me, man. But you'll pay him $25,000, put him in a 5-star hotel, first class tickets. I'm telling you, I tell you no lies. I tell you no lie. Ask me no questions. I tell you no lies. These guys get first class tickets, round trip for them, their families. I ain't gonna put nobody's name on blast, but these are some of your household names that you guys break your necks to get to these conferences because so-and-so is going to be there. And they're like celebrities. And we're fans. Chasing down the latest imam and the latest sheikh, the latest student of knowledge, chasing them down. Meanwhile, what have you really learned? Nonetheless, the Prophet ﷺ, in recent times, didactic lectures, educational seminars, these weekend seminars, the fiqh of chilling, the fiqh of, drinking soda, the fiqh of being on the internet, the fiqh of, men and women, the fiqh of this, the fiqh of that. You turn that into a whole entire course. Are you serious? And meanwhile, some of our children, we send our children to these seminars, these weekend seminars, and they come back worse than when they went. Because for the 2 days that they're going there, they're intermingling, they're sitting with their homies and, they see the girls over here and they're communicating the whole time that the seminar is being conducted. We're laughing, we're giggling, we're joking, and then you're spending your money. Thousands of dollars parents are kicking out so their children can go chill with this sheikh or chill with that sheikh. That's all you're doing. You're paying money so your children can go sit with a celebrity sheikh, a celebrity scholar. Stop me when I'm lying. Proceeds to sip coffee. Stop me when I'm lying, man. This is what we have turned Islamic teaching and preaching into. It's become a celebrity culture. Celebrity culture. This is what it is. But in recent times, didactic lectures, educational seminars, and courses are mediums that are used to empower listeners with little to no regard for practical application and exemplification of the Prophet ﷺ's extraordinary character. The legislation of Islam emphasizes practical application of its tenets as an individual duty upon every single Muslim, and are not abstract injunctions imposed on its followers for the sake of theory and academic discussions. Islam is practical application. Give me one incident where someone came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked for advice, asked to be directed in a certain manner, and he did not give them something that they could practice right then and there, right there in that moment. Everything is practical. These are not just abstract theoretical, discussions that we throw around for, academic, to satisfy our, our thirst for academia. I believe How to Win Friends and Influence People lends greatly to the discussion on moral excellence, through which we can analyze the character of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions more intimately, from a more contemporary perspective with a more tangible objective. I'm saying that by reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, it will now put you in the mindset of being able to extract from the Prophet ﷺ sunnah, the moral excellence that we see, the tidbits of moral excellence that we see in the Prophet ﷺ's engagements with his community. Can you believe in 2009 when this book was published, I was condemned by Salafis. I was condemned because I was taking from the kuffar. That was the criticism that I'm taking for. I mean, these you can't make this stuff up, man. The people are just so shallow, man. So shallow, I swear. And it's really sad, honestly. It's really sad, man. Anyway, analysis coupled with the intention of practical application is more productive and effective in our attempt to spread the true understanding of Islam instead of theoretical debates that are, at best, one-dimensional and void of any talk of implementation. In recent times, the phenomenon of self-help and self-empowerment principles have provided many with the basic groundwork for motivation towards becoming more internally conscious and personally successful. However, as Muslims, we have in Prophet Muhammad ﷺ the divine blueprint for personal success and moral excellence in all facets of human experience. In all facets of the human experience. It's like, oh, he's promoting Dale Carnegie. Oh, he's promoting a kuf. Most of them had never heard of Dale Carnegie before this to begin with. Most of them probably have never read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People either. And then if you were to ask anyone, what's your issue with him? Oh, he takes from the kuffar. Oh, he gets his knowledge from the kuffar. Is this me getting my knowledge from the kuffar? Or is this me taking from the concept that a non-Muslim did, even if it was a non-Muslim? It's still good. The Prophet ﷺ acknowledged the good of non-Muslims. He didn't dismiss that. The Prophet ﷺ did not dismiss the good of non-Muslims. As a matter of fact, he even in many instances wanted to compensate many non-Muslims for the good that they did. I'm lying? Did not a non-Muslim, did not a Suraka ibn Malik who was chasing the Prophet ﷺ through the desert, and the Prophet ﷺ and his camel kept sinking into the ground, and he finally realized that the Prophet ﷺ was being aided by the divine, and that there was no way that he was ever going to lay hands on him. And the Prophet ﷺ turned around and said to Suraka, go back, man, just stop chasing me, go back. He said, and I promise you that we will conquer Rome, and I will give you the gold bracelets of Caesar to wear around your wrists. I promise you. This was the Prophet ﷺ, who was a man being chased in the desert. A bounty was on his head. And he's telling Suraka ibn Malik, stop chasing me. You see what keeps happening to you. I'm being supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by God. He said, but if you go back and you stop chasing me, you go back, I promise you, when we conquer Rome, this is the Prophet ﷺ, they're in no position. They're in no position to talk about who they're going to conquer at this moment. Here's a man running for his life, a bounty on his head, but he still believes in the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He still believes that Islam will be the dominant force in Arabia. He has no doubt about it. He has no doubt about it. He told Suraka, go back. And I promise you, when we conquer Rome, just imagine this guy, had to leave Mecca twice, had to go to Ethiopia, and then had to leave Mecca to go to Medina. He's the underdog at this point, and he's talking big. Like, when we conquer Rome, I promise you, I'll give you the gold bangles. I'll give you the gold bracelets of Caesar to wear around your wrists. Suraka scratching his head like, okay, all right, cool. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, the Muslims didn't conquer Rome during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. They conquered Rome during the time of Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Pay attention. They conquered Rome during the time of Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And Umar had the bangles of Caesar. And he called out to Suraka, Aina where's Suraqah ibn Malik? Where's Suraqah at? Because at this time, Suraqah had eventually converted to Islam. Years later, Suraqah converted to Islam. But Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he remembered the promise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He remembered what the Prophet promised. Subhanallah. He said, where's Suraqah ibn Malik? Suraqah said, I'm here. Ana huna, ya Amirul Mu'mineen. I'm here. The Prophet, Umar said, come here. And he said, stick out your wrists. And he put the gold bangles on the wrists of Suraqah ibn Malik. He said, that was the promise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to you. You remember when he promised you that? When you were chasing him through the desert in Medina? And then Umar told him, now take him off. Suraqah's like, why? What do you tell me? He said, take him off and give him back. He gave him back. And he said, didn't you say that the Prophet ﷺ said that I could wear the bangles of Caesar? He said, didn't you wear them? The Prophet told you you could wear them. He didn't tell you you could keep them. Take them off and give them back. He fulfilled the Prophet ﷺ's, promise to him. But think about the Prophet ﷺ, being chased, a bounty on his head, a man who had no army, had no nothing, no protection, no nothing. You understand? And he's talking big. When we conquer Rome, I promise you, I'll give you the bangles of Caesar to wear. At that moment, it's like, are you serious? You going to conquer Rome? Rome was like, the first authority in that during that time. There was Rome and then there was Persia, the two greatest empires during that time. The Arabs, they were nothing. They weren't regarded as anything. As Herakl, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, he told, Abu Sufyan, I had heard that a prophet had emerged from amongst you, but I never thought that he would come from the Arabs. Like, you guys are nobodies. You're nothing. You understand? Like, they didn't regard the Arabs during that time as anything. But they conquered. And so the point that I'm making is that practical application, we analyze the Prophet ﷺ's the practical analysis coupled with the intention of practical application is more productive and effective in our attempt to spread the true understanding of Islam instead of theoretical debates that are at best one-dimensional and void of any talk of implementation. In recent times, the phenomenon of self-help and self-empowerment principles have provided many with the basic groundwork for motivation towards becoming more internally conscious and personally successful. However, as Muslims, we have in the Prophet ﷺ the divine blueprint, the divine blueprint for personal success and moral excellence in all facets of the human experience. A fact pointed out in the Quran very emphatically when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed you have in the Messenger of Allah a model example for he who hopes for his meeting with Allah and the last day and remembers Allah much. And that ayat is in Surah number 33, ayat 21. The reader will also notice that the Quran did not specifically relegate Prophet Muhammad's moral excellence to matters of religious rituals and practices. Rather, he is considered a model example in all facets of life, whether communal, familial, parental, marital, secular, or spiritual. That Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is not just our example as it relates to rituals, religious rituals of salat and fasting and charity, that he's not just our example in that, but in all facets of our lives. In all facets of our lives. You know what I'm saying? The dilemma for many Muslims today is that they don't have the ability to analyze the life and character of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with the depth in order to extract the moral principles that would ensure a more personally successful life within the framework of the religious principles of Islam. Instead, many will search for self-help books which should be supplementary. Key word. Many of us read self-help books Many of us read self-help books, but the self-help books that you guys read should be supplementary to the spiritual teachings that we have in our religion. They are not the primary source of guidance and enlightenment. Self-help books are not the primary source of guidance and enlightenment for us as Muslims. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's character is. Thus, the intended goal of this book is to address the fact that, as Muslims, we should examine the moral character of Prophet Muhammad more critically in order to arrive at the fact that the source of happiness and success in every aspect of human life is in following his guidance unrestrictedly. Happiness should not be a goal for us as Muslims, but happiness should be a byproduct of an obedient lifestyle. Happiness is not the goal. We are not trying to be happy. We are not striving for happiness. You guys following me? Happiness is a byproduct. It is something that automatically happens to a person who decides to live their lives in complete and total obedience to God. Happiness is a byproduct. It's not a goal. We're not striving to be happy. We're striving to be obedient to God. And in doing so, we achieve happiness along the way. All right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah number 16, ayat 97, whoever does righteous deeds, whether male or female, pay attention to the ayat. Ayat is confirming what I just said. What did I say? I said happiness is not the goal in the life of a Muslim. Happiness is a byproduct of an obedient lifestyle. Proof for that is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whoever does righteous deeds, whether male or female, while they believe, we will give them a good life. You understand? We will give them a good life. لَنُحْيِيَنَّهُ حَيَاةً طَيِّبًا. We will give them a good life. That whoever does righteous deeds, whether male or female, while they are believers, then we will give them a good life. You understand? Having a good life, having a happy life, having a fulfilled life is a byproduct of a lifestyle of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not that we're striving to be happy. Happiness is something that comes with the territory of being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was the preface of the book. And then there was the second book, and that is called The Revolution of Love. Now this book, a lot of Muslims, especially women, really dislike me because of this book. Proceeds to sip coffee. I'm going to need some coffee for this one. There are a lot of Muslims who hate me because of this book. The Revolution of Love, a man's perspective on loving multiple women in a non-traditional marriage. So let's talk about this one for a little bit. The why behind this book. I walked into Islamic bookstore one day, and I went over to the section on marriage. I actually was in Barnes and Nobles, believe it or not. I was in Barnes and Nobles one day, and I noticed that most of the books that were written, there were some books that were written on polygyny in Barnes and Nobles. And I found that most of the books that were written on polygyny were written by women. As a matter of fact, all of them were written by women. And I found it kind of strange that women would be writing a book on polygyny. And some of them weren't even Muslims. Some of them were non-Muslims, non-Muslim women that were writing books on polygyny. And I found that kind of strange. And it just seems like Barnes and Nobles was kind of promoting, anti-polygyny. Obviously, the books that were there, the books that are John Fontaine, Hayakallah, Sheikh. He said, it's because of this book I love you. Allahu Akbar. Now, this is a man's book right here. Right? This is a man's book. Wallah al-Azim. I had a brother from New Jersey. I had a brother who stopped me at an iftar one day. I was in Jersey like 2 years ago. And I was at a particular masjid and I was at an iftar and they were having a cookout or whatever the case may be. So the brother pulled me to the side and he was like, hey, you got any of those Revolution of Love books? And I was like, yeah, as a matter of fact, I got a couple in my car. And he was like, yo, let me get it, but I need to get it from you, but I can't let my wife see it. I'm gonna just keep it in my glove compartment. I'm gonna keep it in my glove compartment. I don't want to bring it into my house because he said, I don't want another wife. He said, I don't want another wife. He said, but I don't want my wife to see the book and think that I'm trying to marry another wife. So I'm going to keep the book in the glove compartment. He said, but I've been hearing so much about this book. I got to get my hands on this book. MashaAllah, Ali Salvin, Hayakallah. And I said, sure, man. Don't. So I'm saying to the brothers, man, like, you got to be a real man to buy this book. You got to be a real man to purchase this book here. You got to be a real man to purchase this book right here, man. Listen. And believe it or not, this book I'm not actually promoting polygyny. Believe it or not. I'm trying to make polygyny look so real and distasteful that only those real men who can handle polygyny will read this book and be encouraged to go and get another wife. I'm trying to separate the weak from the obsolete, in the words of B.I.G. I'm trying to separate the weak from the obsolete with this book. You understand? So, I'm going to read a little bit of the introduction. Introduction is kind of long, and it's long like that for a reason. It took me about 3 years. To write this book. Not because I needed 3 years, but because, just trying to be a husband, trying to be a father, and trying to look after your family, and, just trying to find time to really sit down and invest a lot of time and thought into this, because I knew that I could not, I had to bring it all the way with this. I could not half step. You know what I mean? I could not half step with this. I had to bring this joint all the way. So I wanted to make sure that I could invest in this properly. And the idea for this book was after I came out of Barnes and Nobles and I saw that the books that were written on marriage and polygyny in Barnes and Nobles, as well as in the Islamic bookstores, were all written by women. And I'm like, why aren't men addressing the issue of polygyny? Why? Why are men afraid to address the subject of polygyny? You have many men who want multiple wives, but will not talk about it in public. And for the life of me, I just couldn't understand it. Are we that ashamed? And, of course, prior to coronavirus, feminism was on the rise. I don't know where all the feminists went. I guess during coronavirus, they're still in their homes, with their mouths covered, faces covered, and possibly they're rightfully so. Your mouth is covered, your face is covered, rightfully so. Because prior to the coronavirus pandemic, in the Muslim community, the feminism and the homosexuality and the support of the LGBT, that joint was running rampant. There was no muzzling. There was no shutting them up. It was ridiculous, man. And alhamdulillah, I don't know where the feminists went. For some reason, they're no longer around. They're not. You don't really hear them like that anymore. And I mean, I for one, and I'm okay with that. I know they don't like me, and it's all good. It's all good. But if you notice, prior to the I think it's just real petty to jump on somebody else's live and promote yourself. I think that's just really, really sad that you would jump on somebody else's live and promote yourself. How many levels of low do you have to stoop to get to that point? You would get on somebody else's live and say, if you want this or whatever, contact us or whatever. How do you promote yourself on somebody else's live? I mean, that's a whole new level of low. It's all good. So, after walking out of the bookstore, it dawned on me that there's not really much written on the subject of polygyny from a man's perspective on Quran and Sunnah, obviously, and I said, you know what, I'm going to take some time out of my life and I'm going to dedicate it. And before I started writing it, I went to make Umrah. All right. We took a group from Philly. We went to make Umrah. While we were there on Umrah, there was a brother from Philly who was working in Saudi Arabia at the time, in Jeddah. And we went to his house, we went to lunch, and I was explaining to him, my idea for writing a book on polygyny. And he started to tell me about something called the Coolidge Effect. I had never heard of this concept before, the Coolidge Effect. And he started to tell me about it, and we were talking about, how monogamy is unnatural. I am a firm believer of that. I believe that monogamy is unnatural. I believe that. You can debate me all day long, but I believe that monogamy is unnatural. I don't believe that men were put on this earth to dedicate themselves to one woman and one woman only, with each and every environment that you go into, when women always outnumber men. And if that were the case, that marriage or relationships is supposed to be for one man and one woman, then in every society and every environment, women always outnumber men. So what do we do with the influx of women? What do we do with the influx of women if it's relationships is about one man and one woman and that's it? What do we do about the influx of women? I'm just looking for the answer to that, because there is no answer to that. There is no cure for that other than polygyny. Otherwise, listen, let me do a disclaimer really quickly before we even get into this conversation. This conversation is not about men who shuck and jive and who, do all types of immoral things to have multiple women. This conversation is about men, responsible adult men who can handle the concept of polygyny the way that Islam instructs them to. And I know many men that are in polygyny right now, including myself, who have handled themselves like mature adults when it comes to having more than one wife. So don't make it seem like everybody out here that has multiple wives went about it in the wrong way, went about it in the haram way, went about it in a, immoral way. You have non-Muslim men who are practicing polygyny. Muslim men are not the only people practicing polygyny. I was actually a part of a Facebook group where non-Muslims were practicing polygyny. And albeit they weren't doing it for religious purposes, they were doing it for business purposes. They were doing it for just because they were of the firm belief that it's not natural for men to be monogamous. These are non-Muslims who understand the concept of polygyny right now. Right now, there are Facebook groups right now of non-Muslims who practice polygyny. In some instances, better than Muslims practice polygyny. In some instances, better than some Muslims practice. They have a better understanding of the concept of polygyny than Muslims do. And they're not even affiliated with any religion in particular. It's not even religious for them. Meanwhile, it's part of our deen. It's part of our religion. And we don't want no parts of it. We don't want anything to do with it. Not even if it's just for knowledge purposes. Not even just for knowledge purposes. Like, this book is not promoting polygyny. It's giving you a deeper understanding into the psyche of a man. And this is especially important for women. This book right here is especially important for women. For you to have a deeper understanding of men. Many of you women don't understand men. You don't. That's a fact. Many of you women don't understand men. I'll tell you how. Some of you women, you grew up in homes with single mothers. Your father wasn't around. So obviously, you don't have an understanding of how men function. You don't. If you grew up in a single home, your single mother home, your mother raised you, your grandmother raised you, your aunt raised you, you grew up in a house, you had a matriarchal household. Matriarchal household. You know nothing about men other than what you've seen on the TV and what you heard your mother and your aunts and your grandmothers talking about men, which in most instances came from a biased place, came from their own biases. And they're feeding you these thoughts about men based upon their limited experiences. Because if your mom was single, your aunt is single, your grandmom is single, then they haven't really had a long experience with men either. I'm just being honest with you. And then you have some of you women who have went out into marriage. You went into it the wrong way. How you conducted yourself, how you got the man, how you ended up with that man, it wasn't in an honorable way. You didn't force the man to treat you in an honorable way. You took whatever was given to you. You let the man treat you however he wanted to treat you. You let the man dictate to you where he was going to take you and how he was going to treat you. Because all you wanted to be was in a relationship. You had no standards. You didn't set a bar for him. A man is only going, as I said before, a man is only going to go as far as the bar that you set for him. But if you just hell-bent on being in a relationship, hell-bent on having a man take care of you, and you'll take it any way you want, then you can't blame him for treating you the way that he treated you, because you didn't set standards for him from the very beginning. You didn't, because you didn't know men. You knew nothing about men. I'm writing this book from a man's perspective to tell you what men think and how to understand them, even within the construct of polygyny. Because many of you don't understand men. You don't understand how we think. You don't understand our appetites. You don't understand how we function and why we function the way that we do. So even if you are not interested in polygyny, even if you don't want anything to do with polygyny, it would behoove you to purchase this book and understand why some men do. Some women say, I can't understand why a man would want to marry a second wife anyway, because you don't know men. That's why. That's why you can make that comment. I don't understand why a man got to go after, why a man has a good wife at home who takes care of him. She's pretty. She's sexually takes care of him. She's financially set and stable. Why would he want another wife? Because you don't understand men. That's why you can make that comment. Because you don't understand men. You don't understand men. Nor do you even try to understand men. You don't even try. You paint all men with this broad brush that was given to you, handed to you by your mother, handed to your mother by your grandmother. That's how you see men. You see, many of you women, you see men through the lens of your mother. What your mother dictated to you. This is how all men are. Let me share something with you, sisters. Your mother was wrong. Your mother was mistaken. And I say that with the utmost respect. Your mother was mistaken. All men are not like that. All men are not dogs. All men don't want to take advantage of women. Is it possible that your mother was hurt so bad by your father or by your stepdad or by some man that she was in a relationship with that she projected all of that pain on you and you took it? And some fantasy. Absolutely. So if you didn't have a man in the home, it's not possible for you to have a good idea of who men are and what they want. Because you're not observing a man because there was no father in your home. You can say, well, I got brothers. Okay, your brothers, if they are in the same age range as you or younger, they were immature. All you saw was the immature side of your brothers. You didn't see a man in the home. So back to my point. So when we got to Riyadh, the brother, he started telling me about this concept called the Coolidge Effect. And you can Google it. And after we started talking about that, he was talking about, how it's unnatural for men to only want to be with one woman. I said, you know what? I'm going to make that, the Coolidge Effect, I'm going to make that the first chapter in my book. And that's exactly what I did. I took it, and here's the first chapter in my book, The Coolidge Effect. That was the conversation that I had with him, Brother Dawood, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him. The conversation that I had with him at his house in Jeddah, when I came back and I began preparing the book, I said, I'm going to make that my first chapter. And here's the first chapter. It's called The Coolidge Effect. So let me read to you a little bit. Sisters, I want you to listen and pay attention, please. Pay attention, please. If you're talking, you're not listening. I'll pin the PayPal real quick. Give me a second. Okay, so the email address that I just pinned is my Gmail that is connected to my PayPal account. All right, so if you want to purchase the book is $25 plus $7 for the shipping. $25 plus $7, which is $32. All right, please, if you purchase on PayPal, please be sure to leave your shipping address. All right, so that I know where to ship the book. Sometimes people purchase the book and I don't even know what your address is. Please be sure to leave your shipping address. Sisters, I want you to pay attention, please. Please pay attention. All right? There's an old joke about Calvin Coolidge when he was president. Calvin Coolidge was the president of the United States. There's an old joke about Calvin Coolidge when he was president. He and Mrs. Coolidge were separately being shown around an experimental government farm. When Mrs. Coolidge came to the chicken yard, she noticed that a rooster was mating very frequently. The rooster is the male to the female chicken, right? That's the male. So she noticed that the rooster was mating very frequently. He would mate with one chicken, go mate with another chicken, go mate with another chicken. She's watching this, like this male rooster is mating with all of these different chickens very frequently. And she asked the attendant how often that happened. And she was told dozens of times each day, meaning the male rooster mates with the female chicken dozens of times a day. Dozens of times a day. So Mrs. Coolidge said, tell that to the president when he comes by. Tell that to the president when he comes by. if you say, I respect your opinion, but I respectfully disagree, the Quran says, if you can't deal justice with all, here again, you're doing exactly what I said don't do. Did you read the tafsir of that ayat, or are you just reading based upon the English translation of the ayat? That ayat has an entire story behind it. Until you go back and you read the tafsir of that ayat and the whole reason why that ayat was revealed, you can't respectfully disagree. You can't. You say respectfully because I get it. You want to be respectful to me. And I respect that. But you can't say I respectfully disagree. You're disagreeing based on what? You're not disagreeing based upon knowledge. You're disagreeing based upon a perception that you have of a verse that you read in English that you know absolutely nothing about. Don't you think that I researched that same ayat that you just pointed before I wrote this book? Do you think that I would jump out there knowing that there's an ayah in the Quran that says if you can't be just, then marry only one? Do you think that I would bypass that ayah and write an entire book on something that I did not go back and research myself? That ayah that you are pointing to, I read and understood that ayah before you even laid eyes on that ayah. I'm positive, 100%. You can't respectfully disagree with me and you don't have adequate knowledge to disagree. When you disagree based upon ilm. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, "Nabbi'uni bi'ilmin." Inform me with knowledge if indeed you are truthful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states Tawheed as a fact for the disbelievers of Quraysh. Then Allah challenges them and says, "Nabbi'uni bi'ilm." Inform me, challenge me with knowledge. Allah is challenging Quraysh to challenge the concept of monotheism that he laid out there. He said, "Nabbi'uni bi'ilmin." Challenge me with knowledge. You cannot debate, you cannot disagree on ignorance. I'm not saying that you're ignorant. I'm saying that you're saying I respectfully disagree is based on emotion. It's not based upon knowledge. This is not an emotional debate. This is not an emotional debate. This is not opinionated debate. This is fact. This is ilm. This is knowledge. Ilm al-shar'i, knowledge of the religion that we are talking about here. This is not, I feel like this and I'm going to throw an ayat out there. That might work with somebody of your caliber, but it's not going to work with me. You will never be able to throw an ayat out there and then shut me up. Because if I already don't know the ayat, and it's probably not an ayat in the Quran that I'm not familiar with, I'll tell you that. There's not an ayat in the Quran that I am not familiar with. I know my book in and out. There's not an ayah in the Quran that you can give me that I haven't already studied, that I don't already know the backstory behind, that I don't already know when and where and why it was revealed. And I'm not saying that to praise myself. I'm saying that because I love my book. I love the Quran. You understand? I love the Quran. There's not an ayah in this book that I am not familiar with, period. So you will never be able to throw an ayat, you know what I mean, at me and just get me to, no. And if you respectfully disagree, then have the same level of respect for me, the same level of respect that you have for me to disagree, have the same level of respect for your intellect. Don't jump out there and say, I respectfully disagree because Allah says this here. And then when I challenge you on that ayah and I show you that you are actually in error in your understanding of the ayah, that shows a lack of intellect, a lack of respect for your intellect. Ihtarim nafsak, as the Arabs say, have a saying, have respect for yourself, man. Ihtarim aqlak. Respect your intellect, man. Don't jump out there, man. Yes, I will ship internationally. Just email me, please. Email me. So Mrs. Coolidge, she said to the attendant, when Mr. Coolidge, tell that to the president when he comes by. Meaning, tell that to the president that the male rooster mates multiple times a day. So she's making a joke with her husband to tell him that, hey, the male rooster mates multiple times a day. So listen to what he says. So, upon being told, the president asked the attendant, is it the same hen? Is it the same chicken every time? Meaning, does the rooster mate with the same chicken every time? The reply was, oh no, Mr. President, a different hen every single time. The president said, well, tell that to Mrs. Coolidge. Meaning, the rooster does not mate with the same hen every single time. It's a different hen. And so while his wife, Mrs. Coolidge, was trying to make a joke that maybe he needs to have sex with her more often, the joke was on her because the rooster doesn't mate with the same hen multiple times a day. It's a different hen every single time. Most human males, sisters, I'm about to give you a jewel. I need you to pay attention. I need you to pay attention. Pay attention to this. What I'm about to tell you is going to blow your mind. Listen to me. Most human males experience what is called post-ejaculatory refractory period after sex. Do you guys even know what that means? Most human males, I'll say it again, because this answers the question as to why after your husband, and for those of you who are not Muslims, who are listening, why your boyfriend, why your mate, why your life partner, why after you have sexual intimacy with your husband, and afterwards you want more, but he doesn't want to be intimate with you anymore. This explains why. This explains why for some men, why you go through all of the trouble to court a woman week after week after week, month after month after month, to court this woman, only to marry her and then have sex with her, and then you want to be the furthest thing away from her. You don't want anything to do with her. You want to get as far away from her as possible. This explains why. Absolutely. It explains why. It explains why a man goes through all of the trouble to court a woman for months, only to have sex with her and then decide this woman is grotesque. I don't want to be around her, and I want to get away from her, as far away from her as possible. And you sitting there as a woman trying to figure out, why doesn't he like me anymore? Why doesn't he want to be with me anymore? He told me all of these things. Yes, because men know that women listen to the things that we say. So we'll say whatever it takes to get you. Men, most human males experience a post-ejaculatory, meaning after he ejaculates, refractory period after sex. As a result, they are temporarily incapable of engaging in sex with the same female after ejaculation and require time to recover full sexual function in most males. Meaning, after a man is sexually intimate with a woman, he usually cannot mate with the same woman until he has had time to recover. That's a fact. There's nothing wrong with you, sister. Some of you women have had this issue with men and had you thinking that there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. Nothing wrong with you. Everything wrong with him. Some of you changing your face, changing your hair, doing things to your body because you think that he's not attracted to you no more. It's not that he's not attracted to you anymore. It's not that he's not attracted to you. What the heck am I talking about? Do I have to read that again, or do you guys understand? Do you guys get it? Do you guys get it? women, I'm hoping, and this is also knowledge for men as well. Men need to understand this about themselves. That as a result, men are temporarily incapable of engaging in sex with the same woman, the same female, after ejaculation